All right, so this story now, South Africans will have to dig deeper into their pockets as the electricity tariff hikes kick in from 1st of April. That's today. The tariffs will increase by 18.65% for standard Eskom customers and 18.49% for municipalities for the 2023-2024 financial year. The National Energy Regulator approved the application for the power utility to hike the tariff in January, even though the country continues to face rolling blackouts. We're joined by Energy Analyst Chris Yelland to give us insights into this. Mr. Yelland, good evening and thank you very much for your time. It's been a long road to this double-digit hike. Many spoke out against it, saying NERSA had allowed other issues plaguing the power utility to influence its decision. Just take us back to that time. What were your views around that debate of just the double-digit hike?
Of course, it's very galling for customers to be faced with such a tariff hike whilst, in fact, we're in the midst of load shedding. So you know that the 18% price increase this year and the further increase next year will amount to a 33% increase over the next 2 years. And at the same time, with load shedding, we're facing up to, well, we have faced up to 8 hours a day of load shedding, which is about 33% of the working day. Things have eased a little bit in the last week or so, but it's very persistent. And in fact, load shedding has actually increased a little bit of late. And we're facing a rocky road ahead. So this problem is galling to customers. But if you've followed Eskom's interim financials, which were released yesterday, in fact, Eskom is in a very dire financial position, and unless the money comes from the customer via the tariff, money is going to have to come from the taxpayer via bailouts. So whatever happens, we pay. The question is, do the customers of electricity pay or do the taxpayers pay? And to be honest, there's probably not much difference between the taxpayers and the customers of electricity. So one way or another, we're going to pay.
Exactly. So now what happens, because it seems that the situation is about to get even more dire because a number of people now are getting off the grid. So would that mean that we're possibly going to pay even more as more clients leave Eskom?
Well, no, I don't think that's correct. Remember that Eskom is not able to meet demand as things stand. So people going off the grid are not causing Eskom to lose revenue, because Eskom is already losing that revenue through load shedding. In fact, people going off the grid are going to help Eskom by relieving it of a burden that's unable to meet at the moment. So people are going, by supplementing the energy needs and using less electricity from Eskom, are just relieving Eskom of a burden. And it's not a financial burden on Eskom. We're actually relieving them on a burden on the electricity grid and therefore helping Eskom.
Were you of the view that that double-digit increase was justified, though? Because just that consideration, or what other politicians had stated actually, that perhaps NERSA considered other things that they shouldn't have when it comes to that particular increase, even though they actually wanted substantially more.
You have to understand that NERSA is bound by law to ensure that Eskom can recover all its efficient and prudently incurred expenses through the tariff. So in many respects, NERSA's hands are tied. They have to allow Eskom to recover its costs, its prudently and efficiently incurred costs. The question is that there are a lot of costs that Eskom incur that are doubtful as to whether they are actually prudent and efficient. And this is where the regulator exercises independent judgment and decides what of Eskom's costs or line items in its cost structure it's going to allow to recover through the tariff and what is not going to be allowed. So, for example, not all of Eskom's diesel costs are allowed to be recovered through the tariff. That has to be, borne by Eskom, and ultimately it gets recovered through bailouts. That government has been effectively bailing out Eskom for about 50 billion rand a year for the last several years. So all I'm trying to say is that no matter what NERSA grants, anything that NERSA does not grant gets recovered via bailouts, unless Eskom changes its operations and becomes more efficient and more prudent and runs its operations better. So there is enormous pressure on Eskom to operate more efficiently and more prudently. Government has to come to the rescue ultimately, because if it doesn't, the economy will fail. So we're kind of caught between the devil and the deep blue sea. But I do believe that one should not simply look to the electricity customer as the solution to all of Eskom's financial problems. One also needs to look at Eskom as a business, and perhaps it should start selling some of its assets. Perhaps it should be restructuring and unbundling and listing some of its operations on the stock exchange to raise capital. Perhaps it should be reducing its cost structure by tightening its belt. And there are, in fact, a whole basket of activities that Eskom can and should be embarking on, and not simply relying on the customer, to resolve its financial problems.
Now, Mr. Yelland, before I let you go, the minister has been crisscrossing the country on a fact-finding mission of what exactly is at the center of this persistent load shedding. And at least what he's found out now is that there are technical issues. Very little corruption, but technical issues. Where do you stand on that matter?
Well, of course, there are technical issues. We all know that there are design problems at Kusile Power Station and Medupi Power Station. We know that there are problems with the flue gas desulfurization plant, with the ducting that goes into the chimneys that have failed. We know that there are problems with maintenance and all of that. But that does not mean that there is no corruption and mismanagement and maladministration at Eskom. Far from it. We know that at Kusile, a former CEO of Eskom, Machala Koko, is facing criminal charges of money laundering, corruption, and maladministration, together with his wife and his stepdaughters. And we know that Kusile has been the very center, heart and center, of corruption at Eskom. So what I'm saying really is we know that there are technical problems. That goes without being said. But to try and deny that there are problems with corruption, I think is not correct.
Mr. Yelland, thank you very much for your insights this evening. That was Energy Analyst Chris Yelland.